Today we're diving into 10 criminally underrated single-player games you probably missed. These aren't obvious picks everyone talks about every year. These are the hidden gems, the risky projects, the games that tried something different and actually pulled it off. For each one, I'm going to break down why it deserves way more love and what makes it special when you finally sit down and play it. Let's get into it. If you skipped this one back in 2015, I honestly get it. It launched the same day as Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain, and that alone buried it for a lot of players. But once you actually sit down and give Mad Max a real chance, it's shocking how good it feels to play. The desert world is harsh, empty, and strangely beautiful, and that loneliness fits the tone perfectly. This isn't a loud, over-the-top blockbuster game. It's gritty, slow-burning, and all about survival. The real star here is the car combat. Upgrading your magnum opus from a rusty scrap heap into a roaring war machine feels incredibly satisfying. Every engine upgrade, every new harpoon attachment, every bit of armor you bolt on makes a real difference. When you're chasing down convoys through sandstorms, ripping wheels off enemy vehicles mid-chase, it feels chaotic in the best way possible. It's one of those systems that's easy to learn but surprisingly deep once you start experimenting. The hand-to-hand combat is clearly inspired by the Arkham-style rhythm system, but it has its own heavy, brutal identity. Every punch feels weighty. Every finisher looks painful. There's a rawness to it that fits the world. And while the open-world structure can get repetitive, there's something weirdly relaxing about clearing out camps, lowering threat levels, and slowly taking control of the wasteland. What really makes Mad Max underrated is that it commits fully to its atmosphere. It doesn't hold your hand much. It doesn't try to be flashy. It just lets you exist in this broken world, scavenging for scraps and fighting to survive. And when everything clicks, it's way more immersive than people give it credit for. This is one of those games that quietly does everything right and still got overlooked. When Prey launched, a lot of people didn't even know what it was. It shared a name with an older franchise, had confusing marketing, and released in a crowded year. But once you step onto the Talos space station, you realize this isn't just another shooter. It's one of the smartest single-player experiences of its generation. What makes Prey special is freedom. Not open-world freedom, but problem-solving freedom. You're constantly asked, how do you want to handle this? Maybe you hack a door, maybe you find a key card, maybe you turn yourself into a coffee mug and roll through a tiny gap. Yes, that's actually a mechanic. The game encourages creativity in a way most modern titles don't. There's no single correct solution, and that makes every player's experience feel personal. The atmosphere is another huge win. Talos I feels believable. It's quiet, tense, and sometimes genuinely unsettling. The shape-shifting Typhon enemies keep you paranoid because literally any object could be a threat. You start second-guessing everything. That constant tension makes even simple exploration feel intense. And then there's the progression system. The more alien abilities you unlock, the more powerful and flexible you become, but it also changes how the world reacts to you. It's a subtle but brilliant way to tie gameplay choices into the narrative. Prey didn't get the mainstream hype it deserved, but if you love smart level design, immersive sims, and games that respect your intelligence, this one is a hidden masterpiece. It doesn't shout for attention, it earns it.
That you too can turn into a cup. The roster system helps players locate anyone aboard Talos 1.
This game had one of the roughest reputations at launch. Technical issues, mixed reviews, and a lot of people writing it off as just another zombie game. But if you actually played it after the patches and gave it time to breathe, Days Gone turns into something way better than its first impression. At the start, it feels slow. Deacon isn't instantly likable, the world seems familiar, and you might wonder what the big deal is. But then, the story starts to settle in. The emotional weight between Deacon and Sarah becomes the backbone of the experience. And suddenly, it's not just about surviving freakers, it's about holding on to hope in a world that already gave up. That slow burn storytelling ends up being one of its biggest strengths. And then, there are the hordes. The first time you see a massive swarm moving like a living wave across the landscape, it changes everything. Fighting a horde isn't about spraying bullets and hoping for the best. It's about planning, using the environment, setting traps, and barely surviving by the skin of your teeth. When you finally take one down, it feels earned. genuinely earned. The open world also grows on you. Riding your bike through the Pacific Northwest, managing fuel, upgrading your ride, dealing with weather shifts, it creates this grounded survival vibe that feels immersive. Your bike isn't just transportation, it's your lifeline. Days Gone isn't perfect, it's long, it can be repetitive. But beneath that is a heartfelt story and some of the most intense horde gameplay in single-player history. It deserved a second chance, and a lot more respect than it initially got. This might be one of the most misunderstood PlayStation exclusives ever made. When The Order 1886 launched, the biggest complaint was simple. It was too short. And yes, you can finish it in under 10 hours. But here's the thing. Length doesn't automatically define quality. What this game does in those hours is actually impressive. First of all, the presentation still holds up. The Victorian London setting mixed with steampunk technology creates a world that feels unique and detailed. Walking through dimly lit streets with fog rolling in, hearing distant chatter and carriage wheels, it feels cinematic in a way very few games managed back then. Even today, the visuals and character models look ridiculously good. The combat is straightforward, but the weapons are where it shines. Thermite rifles, arc guns, experimental tech that feels powerful and dangerous. Every encounter feels intense because the game keeps things tight and focused. It's not bloated, it's not padded, it moves with purpose. What really stands out is the atmosphere and storytelling ambition. It tries to build a larger universe with knights, conspiracies, and supernatural threats. You can feel there was a bigger vision behind it, and while it doesn't fully explore all of that potential, what's there is intriguing enough to make you want more. The Order 1886 became the easy target for criticism because of its length, but if you approach it like a high-quality interactive film instead of a massive open-world epic, it hits differently. It's polished, focused, and way better than its reputation suggests. GreedFall is one of those RPGs that didn't have a massive budget, didn't have flashy marketing, and still managed to deliver something surprisingly deep. It kind of slipped through the cracks because it wasn't backed by a huge studio, but if you love classic choice-driven role-playing games, this one deserves attention. The setting alone makes it stand out. Instead of the usual medieval fantasy world, you get this 17th century-inspired colonial island filled with political tension, mysterious magic, and clashing factions. You're not just swinging swords at monsters, you're negotiating treaties, choosing sides, and shaping the balance of power. And what makes it interesting is that there isn't always a clear, good choice. Every faction has its flaws, and your decisions actually affect relationships and outcomes in meaningful ways. Companions are another highlight. They're not just background characters following you around. They react to your choices, they have personal quests, and some of them can completely disagree with you. That adds weight to your decisions because you start thinking beyond just rewards. You start thinking about loyalty. Combat isn't revolutionary, but it's flexible. You can build your character as a mage, a duelist, or mix magic with firearms. The freedom to approach fights your own way keeps things engaging, especially when combined with dialogue options that can sometimes avoid combat entirely. GreedFall has rough edges, animations can feel stiff, and some areas repeat assets. But beneath that is a genuine old-school RPG heart. It respects player choice, builds a unique world, and gives you the feeling that your decisions matter. And honestly, that alone makes it criminally underrated. This is one of those RPGs that should have been way bigger than it was. Kingdoms of Amalur. Reckoning had the misfortune of launching in a year packed with heavy hitters, and it just didn't get the spotlight it deserved. But if you actually dive into it, you quickly realize how much effort went into building this world. The combat is the first thing that grabs you. It's fast, flashy, and genuinely satisfying in a way most RPGs at the time weren't. Instead of stiff, slow encounters, you get smooth combos, magical abilities that feel powerful, and dodge mechanics that make fights feel dynamic. Whether you're swinging massive greatswords, chaining daggers with poison effects, or blasting enemies with elemental magic, the gameplay just feels good moment to moment. It's that simple. What makes it even better is the flexibility of the class system. You're not locked into one path. You can respec, experiment, and blend different skill trees to create your own hybrid builds. Want to be a stealthy mage with heavy armor? Go for it. The game encourages experimentation instead of punishing it. The world itself is colorful and rich with lore. It leans into high fantasy with unique races, deep backstories, and tons of side quests. Some of those quests feel surprisingly detailed, not just basic fetch missions. You can tell there was real passion behind the writing and world building. Kingdoms of Amalur may not have become the next big RPG franchise, but it absolutely nailed the fun factor. It's one of those games where you look at the hours played and wonder how they disappeared, and that's usually the sign of something special.
You're going to need more than just that sword. That one had a bow. Get it?
Enslaved, Odyssey to the West is one of those hidden gems that almost feels like a love letter to storytelling in games. It never blew up in the mainstream, probably because it was overshadowed by bigger releases back in 2010, but if you give it a shot today, it still holds up beautifully. The first thing that hits you is the world design. Post-apocalyptic landscapes mixed with remnants of a ruined civilization give the game a melancholic, almost poetic feel. You're not just running through levels. You're exploring a world that feels lived in, broken, and strangely vibrant at the same time. Pair that with a believable AI companion in Trip, and suddenly every jump, climb, and escape from enemies carries more weight because of the emotional connection. Gameplay blends platforming, puzzle solving, and combat in a way that flows naturally. Combat isn't overly complex, but it's strategic enough to feel rewarding. Timing attacks, using the environment, and coordinating with Trip makes encounters tense and satisfying without ever feeling repetitive. What really makes Enslaved stand out, though, is the story and character work. The writing gives the duo depth, humor, and occasional heartbreak, and the voice acting makes it all feel authentic. By the end, you genuinely care about where they end up, which is rare for an action adventure that could have been just another pretty game. It's a short ride, but one that leaves a lasting impression, definitely one of those underrated titles that deserves more love.
One pod remaining.
One
Shit.
pod remaining.
Oh, come on. Come on, you idiot.
Ryse Son of Rome often gets dismissed as just a flashy, story-driven hack and slash, but there's more to it than most people give it credit for. When it released, a lot of players saw long, cinematic battles and thought it was shallow, but if you actually dive into the combat, it's surprisingly engaging once you get the hang of the timing and execution. The game's biggest strength is the visceral feel of fighting. Roman soldiers, barbarian hordes, and arena battles all hit with weight. The combat system rewards precise timing for parries, counters, and executions, which makes each fight feel like a real challenge rather than just button mashing. When you finally pull off a perfect chain of executions, it's legitimately satisfying. Visually, Ryse is stunning. The attention to detail in armor, weapons, and the Roman architecture is incredible. Walking through the Colosseum or leading legions into battle has a sense of scale and authenticity that few games achieve. Combined with the story-driven approach, it almost feels like playing an interactive historical epic. It isn't perfect, campaign length is short, and replayability is limited, but Ryse nails the feeling of being a Roman general in a brutal cinematic world. It's a title that deserves another look, especially if you've never played it and enjoy story-heavy action with real combat weight. Vampyr is one of those games that quietly sneaks under the radar but leaves a surprisingly strong impression if you give it a chance. At first glance, it looks like just another vampire RPG, but it's actually a thoughtful exploration of morality, choice, and consequence in a beautifully dark early 20th century London. The game's core hook, balancing your humanity with the need to feed, is simple but incredibly effective. Every life you take as Dr. Reed matters, not just mechanically, but narratively. Townspeople have their own lives, routines, and backstories, so choosing who lives and who dies isn't a trivial decision. That tension gives Vampyr a unique weight most RPGs don't bother with. Combat is solid and surprisingly engaging. Mixing melee, ranged weapons, and vampiric powers gives fights some variety, and the way enemies react to your abilities keeps encounters tense. It isn't a perfect system, some encounters feel repetitive, but the moral stakes elevate every skirmish beyond mere mechanics. Beyond gameplay, the atmosphere is gorgeous. Foggy streets, gaslit lamps, and a hauntingly moody soundtrack make London feel alive yet oppressive. And the character writing is surprisingly strong. You start caring about people you might never meet again, which is rare in games with dark themes. Vampyr may not have had the biggest launch or the widest audience, but it's a smart, atmospheric RPG that rewards patience and thoughtful play. If you missed it, it's one of those underrated gems worth sinking into. Binary Domain is one of those games that quietly impresses if you actually give it a chance, yet it rarely comes up in conversations about underrated shooters. Released in the middle of a crowded year, it was overshadowed by bigger franchises, but it has a surprising depth that makes it stand out. The first thing you notice is the team dynamic. Unlike most shooters where your AI companions are just cannon fodder, in Binary Domain your squad actually feels alive. They talk, argue, and react to both the mission and your actions. You start caring if they survive, and the game even penalizes you for recklessly putting them in danger. That emotional connection makes firefights more intense and meaningful. Combat is fast, fluid, and rewarding. The mix of cover-based shooting with close-quarters action and occasional melee makes every encounter feel dynamic. The game also throws in smart enemy AI that reacts to your strategies, which keeps you thinking rather than just running and gunning. And then there's the story. It might sound cheesy at first, but the humans versus robots angle is surprisingly engaging, with some genuine twists and emotional moments. The game explores identity, loyalty, and what it means to be human in a way that's more thoughtful than your typical action shooter. Binary Domain didn't make headlines, but it deserves to be remembered for combining solid mechanics with storytelling and a cast you actually care about. If you've never played it, this is one of those hidden gems that hits harder than you'd expect.
I'll cover you. Age before beauty, my friend. Everyone's a goddamn comedian. Whoa!
And there you have it, 10 criminally underrated single-player games that so many of us missed. Each one of these games has something unique to offer, whether it's gripping combat, deep story choices, or a world that just pulls you in. If you've played any of these, I want to hear your thoughts. Did they live up to the hype for you, or did they surprise you in ways you didn't expect? And if you haven't played them yet, well, now you've got a roadmap for your next gaming session. Some of these are absolute hidden masterpieces waiting to be discovered. Drop a comment with which one you're starting first, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next hidden gem list. Until next time, keep gaming and keep exploring those overlooked worlds.